Hello everyone. For this video I wanted to try something different. I wanted to do a new segment where I basically revisit classic comic book stories or storylines, that have a lot of influence on comic books and that were just, to me, are just great pieces of literature. And I wanted to go over them and basically just kind of revisiting them, kind of explain why they're so good, why they hold up to this day. And for the first one I want to do was Amazing Spider-Man #3, the first appearance of Dr. Octopus. It's a great classic story. It has so many good, strong elements to it, story threads, and it's a really strong story. Yes, there's some of the writing, some of the dialogue is a bit aged. There's some kind of silly dialogue and lingo that's used, but that's just a product of the time. Overall, it's a really strong story. So the issue starts off with Spider-Man going after some street-level thugs. He beats them up pretty easily, and he's pretty happy with himself. He's being very cocky at this point. He's only had maybe 2 or 3 encounters with enemies, and he feels like he's got a pretty good hold on the superhero thing at this time. He even says something along the lines of, like, "I'm pretty much unstoppable. I kind of wish somebody would come along that could give me a challenge." Oh boy, does he realize that he's about to be in for a hell of a challenge. This is a great issue because it really sets up Spider-Man as this young teenager that just feels unstoppable and top of the world at this point in time. The issue then flips over to introduce us to the villain, Dr. Octavius. He is working on some kind of radioactivity or whatever, some science mojo, and he has his mechanical arms that he uses to help him do the procedures without getting himself in danger. But of course there's an explosion and the arms get bound to him, becoming part of him. And it's very interesting. I love the art in this panel because Steve Ditko is just great at doing explosions. I mean, you see that a lot in this issue. He's great at doing these big explosive action sequences. So Octavius starts holding the doctors hostage in the hospital, demanding answers. Spider-Man hears about it and goes to fight him. They get into a pretty cool little fight, and Spider-Man's being all cocky. He's being his typical Spider-Man that we know him from today, where he makes a lot of wisecracks and jokes and just talks all highly about himself. But Octavius is not having it. He just basically whoops Spider-Man's ass pretty quickly in this fight, turns the tide pretty quick. And he has this great sequence where he's holding him upside down with his tentacles, and then he just bitch slaps him in the face, throws him out the window like he's a piece of trash, and just leaves him there. It's not even worried about him. It's actually a really great sequence because Octavius is basically he's so much higher level in his mindset and his powers at this point that Spider-Man is nothing. He just throws him out the window like he's a bug, like he's a literal bug, and I love that. I love the way that storytelling is done. We then get this beautifully drawn panel that really shows the emotion of what Peter's going through when he takes his mask off and he just looks down like he's totally destroyed. He's broken. His spirit's broken. He doesn't. He's realizing now that death could easily come to him at any point. That this is really a dangerous job, and that he should probably give up. And this is probably the first time Spider-Man actually contemplates giving up in the series, which he does a lot. But I think this is the first time they really kind of were playing with that notion, and it's really interesting to see, And while at the same time, Octavius is top of the world. He thinks he's unstoppable. He's heading towards this research laboratory to continue his work. So Peter, being all mopey, he goes to school the next day. He's pretty much given up. He's gonna let whoever else can do it take care of Octavius, which ends up being that when he goes to school, he finds out the Defenders 4 have been called in to try to fight Octavius, but they're too busy with a mission doing something else. So they send Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, to try to handle it. But he has a virus of some sort that's keeping his fire powers from working at full capacity. So he needs to recover for a couple days. So instead of going after Octavius, he's at the school giving a lecture, using his time wisely as I guess he could. And it's a really nice scene because it almost feels like he's talking directly to Peter. He starts talking about very similar ideals that he thought he was at the top of the world, but sometimes you realize that it's not about your powers. It's about working together and using your mind and ingenuity and cleverness. And as he says in the issue, it's about never saying die. Always getting back up and fighting the good fight. And this really resonates with Peter. It's a very motivating scene for Peter. It really sets him into motion and gets him to do what he needs to do. And it even goes and thanks Johnny after the conference. And Johnny doesn't even know what he's thanking him for, but Peter really appreciates it. And this kind of builds a relationship that Human Torch and Spider-Man have for a long time in the comic books, because they're very much the same age and very similar. Not so much in personality, but they're very similar in their like ideals and their kind of their inner struggle, and also their like their drive. They both have a lot of drive to show what they can do to the world. So then we flash forward to Spider-Man heading over to the place where Octavius is at. He sneaks in, but Octavius knows he's coming, so Octavius is looking for him. But instead, Peter decides to run away, which Octavius immediately takes as like a cowardly move, like, oh, Spider-Man's already running away. But instead, Spider-Man is actually heading to the laboratory where he can put these chemicals together so he can make a weapon that he's going to use. Basically, it's a bonding agent that's going to melt Octavius's tentacles to each other. And this really shows. This is one of the first times we really get to see Spider-Man's creativity and his scientific ingenuity come into play as a superhero, as he uses his chemical bond to basically weaken, Octavius and give him a fair fight against Octavius. And you really see the beginning of that kind of friendship in this issue. The fight scenes really are beautifully drawn in this book, and this one is no contender. It's definitely great. And I love the way they show, like, it ends up being Peter actually punching Octavius after the chemicals have bonded to the tentacles. Peter only has 2 tentacles left to worry about, and so he shoots a web into Octavius' eyes, which is a classic scene that we see a lot in the cartoons and the movies, where he shoots the web into Octavius' eyes. We see it a lot, and especially with Octavius, you see it a lot. But this is the first time it ever comes into play. And he uses that just long enough to give Octavius, off balance, so that he can just give Octavius one good right hook. And he even says that it's a villain as powerful as this, all it took was a right hook in the end, which is kind of cool and ironic. So all in all, this is a great issue of Spider-Man because it really sets up the character and a lot of his mentalities that he has going on later on. Because one of the many things that makes Spider-Man such a compelling character to so many people is that his determination, his will to fight and prove his worth. And that's really shown here for the first time very heavily. It's shown in this issue, is that even if he gets beat, he can still come back and save the day. Because in the end, that's what a hero does. They don't let one defeat stop them. And we see a great, little ending moment where he thanks Human Torch as Spider-Man. Human Torch is like, what? I really liked the very last panel is Human Torch flying around, showing off for the kids at the school, and he's thinking about wishing Spider-Man was there with him to be in the spotlight. Because, Human Torch knows that Spider-Man is a good guy, but the general public thinks that Spider-Man is a menace. And Human Torch, you kind of see here that Human Torch really would like to show Spider-Man off as being a good guy in the sight of light, but Spider-Man is a loner. So of course, Peter is more comfortable just being in the crowd, than being out there with Torch. And you see that in this panel as he kind of looks at Torch and thanks him again mentally for all that he helped him with in this issue. So that's all I got for you guys. Thank you guys for watching. And if you guys are interested in these type of retro stories, let me know. And if you want any particular one, let me know also. Thank you guys.